I remember the moment so vividly, I can almost hear the echo of her voice in the hallway. It was 2 days before Easter, and I'd just arrived at Tamara's house, luggage in hand, answering my parents' request that I not spend the holiday alone. My suitcase wheels squeaked across the marble tiles, announcing my presence far too loudly. I tried to be discreet, but Tamara's voice carried with effortless volume. "She won't fit in, Mum. Lena's just too poor for my circle." The casual, almost bored way she said it stunned me more than the actual words. I paused in the doorway, breath caught in my throat, and for a second I wondered if she even realized I could hear her. But she did. She glanced at me over her shoulder, that impeccably made-up face not betraying a single hint of guilt or hesitation. There was an uncomfortable silence before she added, "It's not that I hate her, she's just not a match." I forced a small, breathy laugh, because laughter was the only barrier between my pride and my tears. Hearing your own sister dismiss you so categorically is a gut punch that never quite lands in a predictable spot. Tamara has always been the radiant one, the child you couldn't look away from in family photos, the one who lit up every holiday gathering with her big smile and her bigger personality. Our parents doted on us both, but she craved the spotlight and was rewarded for that craving. Dance recitals, beauty pageants, early modeling gigs, she soared in every social realm, while I stayed tucked quietly in the background, reading books or tinkering with puzzles. People often described me as the shy one, or the studious one, and Tamara reveled in being the it girl. Her world sparkled with likes, hashtags, and designer labels, while mine was built on silent observations and private joys. Over time, her flamboyant lifestyle grew only more extreme, feeding off social media's endless appetite for curated perfection. She excelled at her PR job, not because she deeply understood branding, but because she was a brand in and of herself. Glamorous, magnetic, forever the center of attention. I, on the other hand, was comfortable staying out of any spotlight. After college, I worked a string of finance positions, quietly learning the ropes of stock investment and wealth management. Tamara never showed the slightest interest in my world. Or in me, really. When Mom and Dad announced they'd be spending Easter on a Mediterranean cruise, I thought nothing of it. They had been planning that trip for years. But then Mom called me, voice soft with concern, telling me she didn't want me alone for the holiday. "You and Tamara should spend it together," she said gently, as if this were the most obvious solution in the world. My immediate reaction was to protest. I knew how Tamara felt about having her dowdy sister around. But Mom's logic was, we're both grown adults, we share the same city, and families should be together for special occasions. When she insisted, I let out a resigned sigh and said I'd consider it. Before I could even call Tamara, though, I got a text message from her. "Mom is giving me no choice. You can come if you want. I'm having a few friends over for brunch. Dress presentably." That was it. No smiley face, no warmth, just a directive. Yet somehow, I convinced myself that once we were together, maybe we'd laugh about old times. Perhaps my presence wouldn't be such a nuisance. That hope lasted until I actually walked into her house and heard her scathing critique. After overhearing her conversation with Mum, I quietly slipped upstairs to the guest room. I shut the door, sitting on the edge of the bed, replaying her words in my head. "She's too poor for my circle." My first reaction was disbelief, a hollow sort of shock that reverberated in my chest. But soon, hurt replaced shock, followed by an overwhelming urge to escape. For a moment, I considered just leaving, catching a cab home, ignoring Mum's request altogether. Yet a flicker of pride held me back. Why should I hide from Tamara's insulting view of me? If she wanted to cast me in some cliché role, namely, the impoverished sister in ill-fitting sweaters, then maybe I'd see it through, just to watch her squirm if she ever discovered the truth. I stared at my reflection in the room's gilded mirror. I was wearing a simple black blouse and jeans, comfortable and unremarkable. My hair was in a low ponytail, my makeup minimal. Yes, I was quiet, but quiet didn't equate to powerless, and it most certainly didn't equate to poor. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, deciding that I would stay. For Mum, for Dad, and for whatever unexpected turn might follow. My phone buzzed with a reminder that a market report was about to be released. It was a quiet ping that usually ignited a spark of excitement, reading those figures, analyzing trends, placing strategic trades. That was my private thrill. Tamara never knew that while she was busy showing off her new designer bag, I was funneling money into carefully selected stocks and ETFs. To her, I was just a boring office drone. If only she knew that I had spent the past decade turning a modest set of savings into a $300 million portfolio. It hadn't been easy. I started with just a few $1,000s saved from my first job, meticulously budgeting so I could invest more each month. My nights were spent reading financial reports while Tamara posted photos from exclusive club openings. My weekends revolved around analyzing market volatility while Tamara flaunted brand new shoes. In time, I made bold moves, investing in emerging markets, identifying undervalued tech startups, always reinvesting my gains. I didn't need people's applause or validation for my success. The numbers spoke loud enough to me, and I liked it that way. My wealth was my secret garden, a sanctuary from superficial judgments like Tamara's. Late that night, I tossed in the plush guest bed. Tamara's house was silent except for the faint hum of distant traffic. Even though every inch of that place screamed luxury, from the tufted velvet headboard to the grand chandelier in the foyer, it felt cold, like a stage set designed to wow an audience. I wondered how much she paid just to keep up appearances, how much time she invested in curating her Instagram-worthy existence. My thoughts drifted to the causes I'd quietly funded over the years. The scholarships for underprivileged students, the water filtration systems for remote villages, the library I built in a small town that didn't even have a proper bookstore. Tamara had never asked about my philanthropic pursuits, and I never volunteered the information. Perhaps some part of me feared her derision, or maybe I simply believed that good deeds done in silence had a different kind of purity. I finally drifted off to sleep, unsettled but strangely emboldened. A new question bubbled in my mind. If Tamara and her friends learned who I really was, what I really had, how would they react? The thought made me uneasy, but a small, almost mischievous smile tugged at my lips before I surrendered to sleep. Easter morning arrived with an energetic buzz in Tamara's household. The catering team bustled around the kitchen, setting up lavish floral centerpieces on an enormous marble countertop. Two servers in crisp white shirts carried trays of champagne and sparkling juices, while a harpist stood by the window, carefully tuning strings that glimmered in the sunlight. It was like stepping into one of those high society magazines, everything meticulously choreographed for maximum effect. I slipped downstairs, trying not to draw attention. The scent of fresh flowers and expensive perfume hit me in a heady rush, a fragrance of extravagance. I offered to help, but Tamara waved me off. "Just mingle or something," she said, half distracted, half dismissive. She was dressed in a pastel designer dress that matched the table settings, her hair styled in soft waves that framed her flawless makeup. Her friends began to trickle in. Clara in a tailored jumpsuit, Jasmine in a floral sundress, a few men in linen suits. Their conversations danced from hedge funds to exclusive clubs, from new restaurants in town to who got invited to which celebrity's after-party. They dropped names like confetti, each one an attempt to outshine the other. I stood on the periphery, a silent observer with far more knowledge than they could imagine. Eventually, one of Tamara's friends, an elegant woman I recognized from social media as Amelia, sauntered over to me. She wore an expensive watch that flashed with every subtle movement of her wrist. "And you are?" she asked, smiling in that polite yet distant way of someone trying to place you in her mental hierarchy. "I'm Lena," I replied, offering my hand. "Tamara's sister." Amelia's eyebrows lifted as though she was registering mild surprise. "Oh, right. I've heard a little about you. Finance, was it?" I smiled. "Yes, I work in finance." Before I could elaborate, Tamara suddenly appeared, sliding an arm around Amelia's shoulders. "Lena just dabbles," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "She's low-key." A ripple of gentle laughter spread through the little circle that had formed around us. I felt my cheeks warm, not out of shame but annoyance. I bit my tongue, deciding it wasn't worth correcting her in that moment. Let them laugh. If they believed Tamara's narrative, so be it. I understood that power speaks loudest when it's silent, and I had no intention of using my wealth as a bargaining chip for acceptance. I was here for my parents' sake, nothing more. The brunch itself was a sensory feast. Perfectly poached eggs with hollandaise, artisanal bread baskets, delicate macaroons in pastel colors. Everything arranged like a gourmet photo shoot. A string quartet had replaced the harpist outside on the terrace, and I heard the gentle strains of classical music weaving through the laughter of Tamara's guests. It was idyllic, if a bit overdone. Tamara presided at the head of the table, ensuring everyone was comfortable, constantly adjusting place settings, and orchestrating the conversation to keep it from ever getting too real. I found myself sandwiched between two men who seemed more interested in discussing their next yacht rental than asking anything about me. From across the table, Tamara would occasionally cast me a cursory glance, as if to confirm I was behaving according to her quiet, unremarkable sister script. She needn't have worried. I had no intention of stealing her thunder. I listened politely as Clara launched into a story about an upscale spa she visited in Bali, and Amelia chimed in about a designer pop-up she was desperate to attend. No one asked about my Easter traditions or how I felt about our parents being away. It was as if I were invisible, which suited me just fine. For now. I took in the scene with a detached sort of fascination. The clinking crystal, the gleaming silverware, the lavish floral displays that spilled across the table in an extravagant arc of pastel roses and lilies. Tamara had spared no expense, and the effect was undeniably stunning. But behind the glitz and glam, I could sense the undertow of insecurity, hers, and to some extent, all of her friends. Their constant name-dropping and status-seeking felt like attempts to prove they belonged in a world they'd only just glimpsed. Sipping my champagne, I watched Tamara pivot from conversation to conversation. A perfect hostess. She was truly in her element, shining under the sunlit canopy, her laughter bright and infectious. I recalled a time when Tamara and I were younger, and we'd spend Easter hunting for chocolate eggs in our grandparents' backyard. She was always the one who found them most, shrieking with glee at each discovery. I'd smile quietly then, happy just to be part of her excitement. Funny how some dynamics never change, even if the setting does. In that moment, I felt a mixture of love and exasperation for her. She had no idea that I could buy and sell this brunch 100 times over if I chose to. As the meal wound down, Tamara's guests migrated to the living room, where a tray of petit fours and after-brunch liqueurs awaited. The conversation grew louder, the anecdotes more boastful. Someone brought up hedge funds, stumbling over basic terminology, but everyone nodded sagely as if they fully grasped the complexities. I bit my lip to hide a smile. Amelia turned to me again. "So, Lena, are you traveling anywhere soon? We've got a plan to do a group trip to St. Bart's in the summer," she said, her tone curious but lightly challenging. I shrugged. "I've been traveling off and on. A few months ago, I visited Peru to check out a program I helped fund in the Sacred Valley." Her brow furrowed. "A program you helped fund?" Before I could elaborate, Tamara interjected with a forced laugh. "Oh, Lena's always donating to something or other. Not sure if it's some local community drive or an overseas group. She's really into that stuff." She said it in a way that trivialized my efforts, as if my philanthropic work were a childish hobby. Amelia giggled politely, but she looked slightly intrigued. I noticed that small spark of curiosity and tucked it away, wondering if it would resurface later. Finally, the brunch ended, and Tamara's circle trickled out with air kisses and promises to meet up soon. The house grew quieter, only the staff clearing plates and rearranging furniture in the aftermath. Tamara turned to me, arms folded. "Thanks for behaving," she said, half sarcastically. "Mom will be glad to know we didn't kill each other." I sensed her tension, though. She didn't look me in the eye when she spoke. Maybe she was aware of the tension in me, too. The line about me being too poor echoed in my head. "Why would you say something like that?" I asked softly, not wanting a fight but needing some closure. She sighed dramatically. "Because it's true, Lena. My friends and I live a certain lifestyle, luxury trips, designer outfits, exclusive parties. You can't keep up, that's all I meant." I studied her face, searching for any hint of remorse. "Sure," I said finally. "No worries." She pursed her lips, as if unsure how to respond to my calm. After a pause, she asked, almost curiously, "But seriously, how do you survive on that finance salary? You don't ask Mom and Dad for money, do you?" I just shook my head, smiling faintly. "I manage. I said, leaving her to wonder. I stayed one more night, determined to at least fulfill my parents' wish that we spend Easter together. But I left early the next morning, refusing Tamara's half-hearted offer of a chauffeured ride to the station. My modest car, an older model I kept in impeccable condition, was parked at the curb. As I loaded my suitcase, Tamara stood on the porch in her satin robe, sipping a latte, looking every bit the social media queen. A fleeting twinge of sadness pricked my heart. Even with all our differences, she was still my sister, someone I'd known and loved my entire life. But at that moment, we felt worlds apart. The drive home was filled with silent introspection. I replayed the brunch, the subtle and not so subtle slights, the laughter at my expense. The words that stung the most, she won't fit in. Not because they were necessarily wrong, but because of the assumption behind them, that I needed or even wanted to fit into that circle. I didn't. My life was full in ways Tamara could never comprehend, and, ironically, I probably out-earned everyone at that table combined. I resolved to keep my secret intact. If it ever came to light, it would be on my terms, not theirs. Back at my own apartment, a spacious, sunlit loft in a quieter neighborhood, I sank into my favorite reading chair. As I gazed at the hardwood floors and the minimal but high-quality furniture I'd chosen for comfort more than show, I felt the calm that always enveloped me here. My phone buzzed, a reminder that a scholarship deadline was approaching. That was me. Never a moment's rest from the various philanthropic projects I managed. I opened my laptop and reviewed new investment updates. A couple of the stocks I'd been tracking had skyrocketed. The portfolio was healthy. A smile of satisfaction curled my lips as I noted the growth. That money would translate into more scholarships, more libraries, more opportunities for communities that were often overlooked. This was the life I had built, unflashy on the surface, incredibly fulfilling in its depth. Later that evening, I found a leftover container of homemade soup in the fridge and heated it on the stove, reflecting on how Tamara would probably scoff at my simple dinner. But the quiet comfort of my home, the knowledge that my investments were thriving, and the sense of purpose from helping others gave me a peace Tamara's gilded parties never could. I wouldn't trade it for anything. A few weeks slipped by. I buried myself in my usual routines, working through new potential investments, reading about microfinancing opportunities, and finalizing the details of a community center project I was funding in a small town. My communication with Tamara was minimal, mostly a curt text here or there about how busy she was. I assumed she'd moved on to her next lavish event, forgetting our awkward Easter encounter. Then, one Monday evening, as I was poring over an annual report, my phone pinged. A text from an unknown number read, "Is this Lena M. from the article?" with a link. At first, I was alarmed, thinking perhaps my information had been leaked. Intrigued, I opened the link to see a digital piece titled, "The Silent Titan, Meet Lena M., the discreet investor behind $300 million in smart capital." My heart skipped a beat. The article mentioned my philanthropic endeavors, my knack for spotting emerging markets, even referencing me as an invisible shark in the finance world, someone who maneuvers stealthily yet powerfully. A tiny, unauthorized photograph of me accepting a plaque at a charity gala accompanied the text. My secret wasn't so secret anymore, and I knew it wouldn't be long before Tamara found out. Sure enough, a storm began to brew on the social horizon. Though the feature wasn't mainstream yet, it circulated in the niche circles of private wealth management, exactly the kind of people Tamara and her friends were eager to impress. Clara, Tamara's friend, who worked tangentially with finance professionals, stumbled upon the article and recognized me immediately. She confronted Tamara at some influencer lunch, the way gossip always surfaces in such circles. According to a mutual acquaintance, Clara's initial reaction was astonishment. "Tamara, did you know about Lena's net worth? This article is calling her a financial genius. Is that true?" Tamara, caught off guard, could barely form a coherent reply. She apparently tried to downplay the story or claim ignorance, but Clara pressed on, showing her the photo. There was no denying it was me. A hush must have fallen over their table, as Tamara realized how drastically this revelation challenged her narrative of me being too poor. Later that afternoon, I received the inevitable call from Tamara. My phone vibrated as I was in the middle of a video call discussing an educational grant. I excused myself from the meeting and answered. "Lena, we need to talk," she said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard. I could almost feel her outrage crackling through the line. "You never told me anything about this," Tamara hissed. "Do you know how humiliated I felt when Clara showed me that article in front of everyone? My own sister, and I had no idea who she really was." I leaned against my kitchen counter, inhaling deeply before responding. "I never hid anything," I said calmly. "I just didn't parade my finances around. I don't see why it's my obligation to broadcast my net worth to anyone, including you." She scoffed, and I could imagine her pacing around her living room, nails tapping on her phone in agitation. "But you let us think you were struggling. You wore those plain clothes, drove that outdated car. You literally sat at my Easter brunch and said nothing, while my friends assumed you were some low-level finance drone." The underlying message in her words was that I had somehow deceived her or made her look foolish. It stung, but it also revealed her priorities. I swallowed the indignation in my throat and said quietly, "I don't define myself by my wealth, Tamara. Maybe you do, but I don't. And that's really all there is to it." "That's not all there is to it," she snapped. "You embarrassed me. You made us all look shallow and ignorant." I couldn't help but notice how it was less about her caring for my feelings and more about the damage to her social standing. Taking a seat on my living room couch, I steadied myself for a real conversation. "Tamara, I didn't set out to embarrass you. Honestly, I don't care what your friends think. I care about my privacy, about doing meaningful work, and about not turning my finances into a public spectacle." She took a sharp breath. "You could have given me a heads up. A single hint. I mean, why hide it? Why let us think?" She trailed off. I heard her exhale, a shaky breath that hinted at genuine hurt. For a moment, I realized that behind her anger, she might feel betrayed. "Look," I said softly, "I wasn't hiding. I just live my life differently. I'm not about to post my bank statements or brag about my philanthropic deeds on social media. That's not who I am, Tamara." Silence hung heavy between us, broken only by her quiet sniffle. Then, in an unsteady voice, she asked, "So, what happens now?" We talked for nearly an hour that day, the anger in her voice gradually fading into confusion, then slipping into a fragile understanding. I shared snippets of my journey, how I'd stumbled into investing after college, taking a keen interest in emerging markets, reinvesting every spare penny. I told her about the philanthropic programs I'd spearheaded, the charities close to my heart, and how anonymity in those endeavors was a kind of freedom for me. She listened, interjecting occasionally with disbelief. "You own an island? You're funding water projects in Africa? Wait, you built a library in Colombia?" Each question sounded more incredulous than the last. I explained that I'd never felt the need to flaunt these actions. The results, improved lives, better education, environmental preservation, were all the reward I needed. By the end of the call, Tamara's tone was subdued. "I guess I never knew you, Lena," she said quietly. It was the closest I'd heard her come to an apology. Yet there was a residual edge to her voice, a sense that part of her remained resentful or even jealous. She thanked me for talking and ended the call with a vague promise to see me soon. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. In the days that followed, our family dynamic shifted. Dad called from the cruise ship, somewhat panicked. "Tamara told us something about an article? Something about you being a millionaire?" He asked in a hushed tone as if it were a state secret. I tried to reassure him that yes, I was financially secure and that no, I wasn't running a pyramid scheme or anything illicit. He and Mom were bewildered but supportive. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom wanted to know, her voice tinged with worry. I gently explained my choices, and they accepted it. Perhaps not fully understanding, but at least respecting my decision to stay private. With Tamara, things were still tentative. She sent me a text now and then, no longer condescending, but strangely formal. I sensed she was embarrassed or ashamed to approach me in her usual brash manner. The vanity she held so dear had taken a blow, and she didn't quite know how to navigate this new reality. Meanwhile, life went on for me in its steady rhythm: investments, philanthropy, quiet living. I did notice a flurry of social media posts from Tamara's circle, cryptic references to me as the sister with the big secret, but I didn't engage. I had nothing to prove. One afternoon, I found myself near Tamara's favorite cafe and decided on a whim to drop by. It was a glossy, high-end place, frequented by influencers capturing latte art for their feeds. There she was, sitting at an outdoor table, her phone angled perfectly to capture her face in flattering sunlight. She noticed me and waved me over, looking uncertain. "Mind if I join?" I asked, sliding into the seat opposite her. She set her phone aside and said, "Of course not." But her body language felt rigid, as if she was bracing for confrontation. We made small talk, her latest PR project, a recent trip she took, the rising cost of living in the city. Then gingerly she said, "I'm sorry I called you poor. That was harsh." I studied her expression. Tamara rarely admitted fault. "Thank you," I replied simply. I sipped my coffee, noticing how her gaze flitted around as if she wanted to address the elephant in the room but didn't know how. Finally, she mustered the courage. "So, that article. People are still talking about it. It's crazy. You're basically a star in those circles." I shrugged. "I'm not interested in fame, Tamara. I just do what I do." She fiddled with the sleeve of her designer jacket, her eyes downcast. "I guess I never realized there was another way to be wealthy, without, flaunting it." Her voice was almost timid, a stark contrast to her usual confidence. It made me wonder if, deep down, she'd always been aware of the shallow nature of her social circles. Maybe she envied the tranquility that came from not constantly chasing validation. After a pause, she asked quietly, "Did you ever think I was silly? All the clothes and parties and posts?" Her vulnerability took me by surprise, and my heart softened. I shook my head. "No, Tamara, I just thought we were different. We find value in different things." She gave a small nod, chewing on her lower lip as if grappling with a realization. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of the sister I grew up with, the one who used to share Easter candy with me, who once dreamt of seeing the world and doing great things. I felt a rush of compassion for her. No matter what had transpired, I wanted her to know she wasn't alone in her insecurities. We all had them, just in different forms. We talked for another hour, carefully skirting around raw spots, but managing to find common ground. Before parting, Tamara hesitated, then said, "I'm hosting another gathering soon, something smaller, just a few close friends. If you wanted to come, maybe you could talk about your philanthropy." The invitation was new territory. I saw her cheeks color slightly, a sign of genuine outreach. I considered it. "I'll think about it," I said. Part of me doubted her friends would be truly interested in hearing about my philanthropic strategies. They might just be drawn to the mystique of my newfound fame. Still, it felt like a tentative olive branch. That evening, I reflected on the shift in Tamara's tone. Perhaps she was sincerely curious, or perhaps she feared being judged by people in her circle for not knowing her own sister's achievements. Whatever her motivations, it was a step forward, a chance for us to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. I couldn't forget, though, the quiet pain of hearing her call me too poor. That statement had cracked something in our relationship. Whether it could be fully mended, I wasn't sure. But I was willing to let time and honest conversation do their part. A week later, I was scrolling through my emails and came across a heartfelt message from a student who'd received one of my scholarships. She was the first in her family to attend college, and she wrote about how my support had changed her life. Reading her words brought tears to my eyes. This was what mattered. Real people, real impact, not the glitzy veneer of acceptance into some elite circle. Almost impulsively, I forwarded the email to Tamara with a note that read, "This is why I do what I do." Part of me worried she might scoff at it, but another part of me hoped she'd see beyond her world's surface. Her reply came faster than expected. "Wow, this is incredible, Lena. Congratulations, and thank you for sharing." Short but honest sounding. That weekend, we met for lunch at a quiet bistro. There were no cameras, no designer theatrics, just two sisters talking. We discussed the email, the scholarship program, and how it felt to genuinely help people. I saw her eyes brighten, and for once, she didn't seem to be planning how to post about this on Instagram. The conversation felt raw and real, a glimmer of the closeness we once had. Today, Tamara and I are on cautious but meaningful ground. She's more polite, more curious, though there's still a certain distance in her eyes. Maybe shame for having underestimated me, maybe envy for the path I've chosen. I haven't changed how I live. I still wear my neutral sweaters, I still drive my practical car, I still check investment charts over morning coffee and direct my capital toward causes that resonate with me. The difference now is that Tamara knows. Our parents know. Some in her social circle know. But even under the weight of that awareness, my life feels the same. Purposeful, private, deeply rewarding. When I think back to that Easter morning, when my sister's voice echoed in the hallway, declaring me too poor for her high-flying group, I feel a pang of nostalgia and amusement, because in that moment of hurt, I discovered my own unshakable sense of worth. Wealth, I've learned, isn't about flashy labels or elite invitations. It's about having the power to create change, to uplift others, to be at peace with who you are when the lights go out. And so I move forward, quietly confident, knowing that the greatest luxury is living a life that needs no audience, but can inspire all the same.